This episode is brought to you by Ardan Labs Education. Sign up today to learn advanced concepts in Go, Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and more. Visit ardanlabs.com/education for more information.
Welcome to the Ardan Labs podcast. Our special guest today is Jesús Espino. Jesús, man, thank you for hanging out with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Really happy to be here.
I saw that you are a speaker for the GopherCon Athens, which is happening in February of 2024. And I thought, man, now's the time to talk to Jesús. Right? What's your talk going to be about in GopherCon Athens?
Okay, this talk is kind of a summary of what I consider my aha moments, exploring the source code of Go, because I've been doing some talks about the runtime and the compiler, and during that process, I just realized certain things while I was there. Something like, okay, things. Sometimes it's small things like the internals of slices and how it works, because every time you see up in there, it's like, why is this immutable, but at the same time, how it is efficient and all that stuff that cross your mind, but you don't understand when you start exploring the code. Oh, this is very clever. And for me, there were some aha moments, and I want to share them. And probably for most of the people, some aha moments are going to be, that's silly. And some of them are going to be like, oh, whoa, that's interesting. So that's my expectation. Let's see how it goes.
I teach now, well, let's say now, over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, I've taught to kind of stay away from the mechanics or the implementation of things and really learn the semantics or the behavior, because you're looking at the implementation of something that could very much change in 6 months as the Go team continues to release on a 6-month cycle, right? So all this information that you've spent hours learning goes away almost instantly when they decide to rewrite the scheduler, garbage collection, slices, which they changed, right? They changed the growth algorithm on the slices. So one, I'm curious what made you decide one day, I want to dig into the mechanics of the runtime? And two, do you have any sort of fear that everything you've just learned now at some level goes away because they've just changed everything?
It's partially true that things can go away, but it's not. I'm learning how a real compiler in the real world, production ready, is working under the hood. That's not something that is going to go away from my head after they change it. I already have that insights about how many compilers works. Things like SSA is something that is not strictly something from Go. It's there's some implementation details about Go, but it's not Go specific or AST or things like that. All the process of the compiler is kind of relatively generic to other compilers, so that knowledge is not going to go anywhere. So,
what about the runtime though? I would agree that the compiler is a fairly stable. Yeah, I mean they don't want to optimize, right, heavy because of performance. So learning SSA and AST, I agree that's stable. But on the runtime side, I mean that is changing.
it's changing, but it's kind of the same. I understand that knowing, for example, specifics about slices implementations and all that stuff. What I learned from there is how the algorithm work, not how Go implements this specific algorithm. You have that knowledge for free, but what I was trying to figure out is how is a production ready environment working. And for example, the garbage collector, if you learn about the garbage collector in Go, you understand the Go garbage collector, but you have to understand concepts like stop the world or mark and sweep, and what is that. And with that information, you can transplant that information into other languages and say, oh, okay, this is a mark and sweep garbage collector. This is a reference counting garbage collector. This is whatever. This is generational or not. All that information, it's something that I think is valuable, and you learn through the process of investigating the real project. The reason why I investigated Go is because it's a tool that I use every day. So I really want to know more. I really want to know deeper, but not necessarily because I want to get that knowledge and that knowledge stay there forever. So it's more an excuse to learn from very talented engineers.
That's a totally fair answer. I love it. I love it. Okay. So also, as we're here in the beginning, give everybody the 2 minute, I call it the 2 minute spiel or elevator pitch, kind of on what you're doing today.
It's kind of funny because people see me doing this low level stuff or system engineer investigations in the source code and all that stuff. And the reality is, I'm a web developer. I'm a staff engineer at Mattermost. That is a web-based application. It's basic. Well, it's a communication platform similar to Slack. And what I do there is full stack development. I do a lot of web, a lot of API, a lot of Go, but more in the API side, database access, all that stuff. Not so much in systems, more in the API side. So that's what I do.
Nice, nice. How long you been there?
I've been here for 6 years.
That's pretty good. All right, I don't go any deeper because this is a podcast about you, and I want to kind of get the story on how you've been there now for 6 years. I want to get there. But the very first two things. One, where did you grow up in terms of going to school? Did you grow up where'd you grow? I don't even want to guess, man. I don't want to guess.
I grew up in Canary Islands, so it's a small set of
in
islands.
The Canary Islands.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Tenerife.
Tenerife.
Yes. Well, not in my case. I'm from Lanzarote. That is another island, but yeah, it is the same set of islands.
Oh God, on an island, man. Like, I mean, I grew up on Long Island, but it's connected to the rest of the United States. Okay, like that's a real island. There's no fooling around there.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Actually, when I was a kid, I didn't realize how lucky I was about that, and I started realizing that after leaving Lanzarote and living in Madrid for years, and it's a completely different thing. So
yeah, but like, what's the population?
I think it's like 180 or something like that. 180,000.
Oh, so that's not like too small.
No.
I thought you were going to say like 20, 30,000 people. I was like, whoa.
No.
No, 180,000 is pretty good.
We have islands in Canary Island that is like 2,000 people. So that's it's also possible, but it's not the case of Lanzarote.
I'm on Google right now looking at, because I've been to Tenerife, and I mean that's a pretty small island.
Yeah, mine is even smaller. Yeah.
You don't feel sort of trapped when you're on an island that small where you can drive around the whole thing in like an hour?
Yeah, no, not really, because you are used to that. It's like you don't think about it. If you live in, for example, in mainland in Spain, and you go to Canary Island, I know that some people feel like, okay, I don't feel comfortable living here because I can go anywhere if I pick the car. And when you live in mainland, you can go into Malaga, to Barcelona, to wherever, and just by picking the car. So it's kind of, for some people I know it's a struggle, but I grew up there, so for me it's business as usual.
Okay, so I'm on Wikipedia just because I needed to kind of see this, and Wikipedia is telling me that the population says 62 population is basically 63,000 people.
62,000? It's
like half of what you now. Who knows? Dude? This is Wikipedia.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. Maybe it's true. Sounds like sounds very low to me. And to be honest, there's a lot of floating population, the people that counts for tourism and all that stuff. So I don't know if I mess up the numbers or all that stuff, because I've not been there for ages. So
you must be a scuba diver and all that, right? Because the water sports there have to be.
I was more beach volley and all that stuff.
Beach volley. Okay, that's fair. All right, and you graduate. So in the United States, when you turn around 17, 18, that's when you you graduate what we call high school, and then you're kind of thinking about college at that point. Um, how old were you when you finished all of your, I'm going to just call it grade school, right? You were like 17?
18, 19, more or
All right,
less.
same thing.
The
18.
regular time is 18, but I spent one extra year. I'm not a good student. I'm I'm able to learn everything, but I'm not very good
Yeah,
following the rules of
yeah.
the regular.
And you finished, so we'll just call that grade school. What year was it when you finished grade school?
Around 2000.
2000. Okay. And you did that there in the Canary Islands there. You finished your schooling there.
Yes.
Okay. So I always like talking about, well, here, I have to ask you this question actually first before I even go even deeper. I forgot to ask you this. Now clear your head, clear your head. Very first memory pops in your head when you started working on a computer, or that first time you saw the computer, played on the computer. What's that very first memory that pops in your head?
To be fair, the first memory is using the Spectrum from my big brother. So that's the first memory. Probably I was like 10 or something like that, but I didn't know what I was doing at all. So then,
Was that in the home?
yes, in the home.
Okay.
And after that, I have some friends that have computers and all that stuff. And I talk with my parents and say, hey, I want to have a computer. And my father asked me, do you know what a megabyte or a kilobyte is? And I said, yes, of course, it's blah, 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 blah. And he was like, okay. Looks like you are really interested in this. And I buying me one. So
Okay, two things there. Roughly how old were you when all that happened? And then what was your father doing that he knew all about computer stuff too?
no, he didn't know much about computer. He was working in a bank, but he was using computers in the bank and all that stuff, but wasn't a heavy user of computers actually. Um, and I was around, I will say 14 or something like that.
Yeah, you were just starting the last 4 years essentially of school there. He got you this computer. What did you do on this thing? You just played games, right? Just play. Oh,
Um,
be honest. You just played. You didn't do your homework. You just played games.
Not really. The truth is more interesting. I had a friend. Well, I have a friend that is introduced me to Linux, and one of the first things that I did in this computer, well, some playing and all that stuff, but uh, soon enough I installed Red Hat Linux actually, and I started using it, and I was basically I was that was what traps me there was for me learning about open source and all this Linux system administration, using the keyboard for everything. All that stuff was what keeps me in
Yeah, but
computers.
how did you gain access to this software? Because we're talking pre 2000, so internet is kind of new. Did you have dial-up internet at home?
Yes, but I took a CD-ROM from. I think I bought a Red Hat distribution. Wasn't that early? I think was around 1997 or something like that, or around that date, around that year. And yeah, I get one Red Hat Linux in CD-ROM and I install it, and looks like everything was. I found super interesting everything there, all the open source concept behind all the way of you need to understand a lot of things to be able to do anything. I was using root user for more than a year and breaking everything every week or something like that. So was a very interesting experience. And
Well, that's when you learn, when you break stuff
oh
and it
yeah.
stops working. Then you panic. First you panic, and then you're
Yes.
like, okay, I got to fix this before anybody finds out.
Exactly. Was really exciting times.
So a few things here. You're getting this computer right as you're starting. I'm just going to call it high school for you. So just as you're starting the last 4 years of high school, you're playing with Linux, which is super interesting there. But what other things are you interested in during those years? You said already that you were doing a lot of beach volleyball.
Yeah, basically, that was my some sports like beach volley or regular volley. Also, spending time with friends and all that stuff. But one of the things that I was doing a lot of was chatting through IRC, and the other thing that was aside was learning PHP and using PHP to build some small webs and all that stuff. So I start programming there as an aside thing that I was inclined to learn. Probably all these things that I was learning outside high school was one of the reasons to not get to college in the regular time.
So you were publishing websites? Were you on like MySpace too or anything like that? And how were you publishing those websites?
Oh yeah, I was publishing some of them. Oh, I was kind of small things from, for example, the IRC group that we had in Lanzarote. We published a web page and we use GeoCities. Do you remember GeoCities, right?
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Nothing
Yeah,
wrong
it
with
was
that.
what was there at that time. So
As you're about to graduate, grade school now, is your thoughts, okay, I'm going to go to, is university like big priority on your list? That's what you wanted to do next?
yes, wasn't a priority for me. It was a priority for my parents. So it was like, okay, you have to go to college. Okay, I'll go to college. So I applied for universities in Canary Islands and in Madrid. I get accepted in Madrid, but the funny thing is I didn't apply for computer science. I applied for electronics because back then I was young enough to know everything. So because I already know everything about Linux, about computers, all that stuff was already done. So I get into electronics because it was more low level. Didn't went well.
All right, so you got to move. So you got to move. So you move to Madrid, which is awesome, right? You're off the island finally. You escaped the island. You're on the mainland now, all by yourself. Um, Talk to me about that first year because it sounds like you're going to go after a double E degree. You're going to get an electronics degree.
Yeah, yeah.
It's always yeah, right. But it's a whole new experience. You're not living with mom and dad anymore. You're on your own. You got to go to school. Did you have to get a job too, or you were kind of covered there?
Not really. No, I didn't have to, but I did it. So yeah, the first year I didn't went to class. Basically, I only went to exams because that's possible in Spain. There's no well, I think now it's not possible, but back then was perfectly normal. If you go to the exams and you pass the exams, they are good. There's no problem with that.
No attendance required.
Yeah, exactly. So I was staying in a student residence in Madrid, but the university was like an hour from my residence. So I didn't.
What?
I once, yeah, not my decision. But anyway, I went like sometimes to the university, but in reality, I end up not going almost ever. Also, I start working because somebody said me that they need a database administrator with knowledge of MySQL and all that stuff. And I said, okay, sounds interesting, and I start working. So the first year was a disaster. I only passed the programming class.
A disaster for your academics, but you're
Oh
making
yeah,
money.
yeah. No, yeah, I make some money. Probably it wasn't that much anyway, but well, was again experience
So,
also.
so what happens after the first year and you get home and you're like, let me see your grades, son. And you're like, no, you don't want to see my grades.
Actually, in my university, if you don't pass at least to subjects during the year, you get kicked out of the.
Did you not pass?
No, if you pass only one, for example, you get kicked out of that degree. So, but you can change to another degree. So I changed to computer science, and I started studying computer science.
And then that was just easier for you because you have a knack for that. But you had to start going to class. You had to start at some point going to class, AC. So you
Not
can't.
not really, not really. Actually, I moved to the city where the university was. That was easier for me to attend the university. Uh, but there was another problem then. There was the Linux user group of the university, and I started spending more time in the office of the Linux user group than in the class, and learning a lot. So I don't regret anything of that, but it's something that gets me very slow in the process of taking my degree. It took me like 7 years to finish all the subjects.
They let you be on campus for 7 years as you finished.
Yeah, there's no problem.
No big deal. Is
No
that?
big deal.
But it took you that long because you started taking less classes every semester, or because you had to retake classes?
No, I have to retake classes, so that's okay. I guess as I said, is the problem was, for example, one time I was studying something. I don't know what it was, but
Like your
something.
liberal art classes, not the computer science ones. It was like the philosophy classes, right? That was killing you.
No, 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 not really, not really. The problem was I was the most productive person whenever whenever were the exams time frame. If I was in exams time frame, I will be learning a lot of other stuff. That was the problem. I have a friend that had a Haskell classes, Haskell subject in his university, and I had another stuff that I don't remember what it was, and I was learning Haskell, and he was learning the other thing, and both have the opposite exams. So it's like, okay, you are learning that because you have to, you are basically procrastinating what you should be doing because you are learning all this stuff.
I feel like you didn't. I get the sense that you were gonna learn whatever you were passionate about at the time, and there weren't the consequences of not passing wasn't that high. Whatever, I'll just take it again. So there wasn't any real consequence to not behaving the way you were behaving, and you still got your degree done in 7 years, and your parents weren't on your back apparently about it. I guess you were on your own at that point.
Yeah, most of the time I was on my own, or at least covering a big percentage of my expenses through internships, or later through working directly. So this wasn't it wasn't a big burden for my parents, and actually my parents were very understanding about how I do the things. And the reality is, I wasn't doing a lot of stuff. I was learning a lot of stuff. The problem was I wasn't learning the stuff that the university was asking me to learn. But well,
I mean, you weren't getting in trouble. It wasn't because you just wanted to party more than you
no,
wanted
exactly.
to
No,
go. You were
yeah,
being productive, just not where you needed to be productive at the time.
exactly. And
But you're also working at that time.
yeah, but because I want to work on stuff that was interesting for me back then. So system administration, things like that, was like, oh, I can do some system administration and get paid for it and learn more from it. So was interesting.
So then, by the time you're in year 4, 5, 6, 7, you still working a part-time job, or that turns into more of a full-time?
More in a full time, because, well, I started like working 4 hours, and then 6 hours, and finally full time. Um, because at the beginning I didn't want to work so many hours, and I have to finish some subjects and all that stuff. So I didn't want to work that much, but at the end was like, okay, I have like 3 subjects that I have to go to the exams. I'm not going to go to class anyway, because I'm going to just get the book, read the book, and it's going to be more efficient for me. And did work. So
So your credits were free, right? Like that's all free. You weren't paying out of pocket for those credits.
it's not free, but it's not. It's like it's was cheap. Let's say cheap for a United States education. It was like free, but it's not free. Maybe it's like credits can be like 3,000 per year or maybe 4,000 per year, but not more than that. So it's like
Well, here even in the States, if you go to a community college here in the States, your credits right now are about $110
per
for
credit,
credit. If
and
you
yeah,
go to the next tier university, you're probably at like 220. And then forget about the all the schools
yeah,
that you know, right? Right. I'm talking like the UCF, University of Central Florida would be that next tier school. And you're paying like, but you're still paying $600 for a class at that mid tier, right? You're paying $300 for a class at the community college level, $600 for a class, let's say at the next level, which is where all my kids went because I mean, you could get a loan for $2,500 a semester and it covers your credits. Next level, I mean, that's insane. If you're paying the same price for a class, which is what you're kind of telling me, you're paying like $300 for a class. That adds up, dude. I mean, you're taking classes twice and stuff. So there was some financial consequence there.
yes, but it wasn't that high the financial consequence. And I don't know. I'm messing the numbers for sure. Maybe it was less than that, and was less than that. It's the university in Spain is relatively cheap. Not everybody can afford it, but a regular family with a decent salary can send the kids to college, and it should be fine. So that's not it's not super expensive, but yeah, have some implications, have some extra burden about having to pay multiple times the credits and all that stuff. It worth it. It was okay for me because I was working. I was getting more money than the one that I'm going to spend on that. So
All right, so you finally get your degree, I'm going to guess around 2007.
um, not exactly. took me
Well,
took
you graduate, you started university in 2000, right?
Yeah, yes. Let me explain.
Okay.
I finished my subjects by around 2007, 2008, something like that. My subjects, but I have to prepare the final project. The final project is something that you have to do to get the degree, and it's not something that you have to prepare, and it's kind of you have to find somebody in the university to lead you in the process, all that stuff. Professor in the university to lead you and all that stuff. Basically took me 7 years to just work on that, and find the time to work on that. So it's took me 14 years to take my degree.
All right, time out. Time out for a second. All right, wait. Slow down. Slow it down. Okay. You're telling me that you had to do all this classwork. Even, I mean, let's just say you even got it done in 4 years. That didn't give you a degree. You had some crazy final project, some programming project, I imagine, that you had to submit that you couldn't start till after.
Yes, you to get your degree, you need to get your final project done. The final project can be anything related to the field. It's not necessarily a programming project. Can be an investigation project. Can be whatever you think is interesting and is related to the degree, and your tutor or your the professor that is going to lead you, it's okay with that. So
But normally this is like a 2 month project, a 3 month project.
yeah, if you get full time on it, it can be like 3 months, 3 to 6 months, something like that. It's not something like crazy complex that takes you 7 years, like in my case. Actually, I don't spend 7 years building this project. I spent like 3 months or something like that, building the
But why
project.
did it
And
take you 7 years? I would have been losing my mind. I mean, you could have had. This is mind blowing to me.
yeah, I didn't need the degree to work, to be honest. Nobody has asked me for the degree since I have it, because there's no I already have the knowledge. I already have more knowledge than is required for the degree. So I didn't know the degree to work wherever I want to work.
But it's an accomplishment, man. It's an accomplishment to have that piece of paper. I mean, you worked hard for it.
Yeah, I ended up doing that, especially because my mother really wanted that I have the degree. So I finished that. I ended up finishing that because my mother. But I never used the degree. I never.
No, dude, I would have moved in. I would have moved in with you. I would have said, son, come on, 3 months. We're getting this done. Dale, dale, done, dale, Jesus.
Yes, yes, I totally understand that. As a father, I totally understand that. I 100% agree with that. But as an independent person, I have my reasons. So
That's wild. You got to have such patience. My two boys pushed me on the edge of things. My girls have been super easy. Okay. The boys have been incredibly difficult. The level of patience I don't have. So, man, you're just like my boys, Jesus. Just get to it when I get to it.
probably I will be drive nuts if my kids does that to me.
Oh, no,
But
no, the universe is going to get you back. Don't worry. It's going to
yeah,
happen.
I know, yeah.
So you finish the 7 years, you finish the classes. Now you can really just go full time working, which I think you already were. What is this job that you're working at this point?
Okay, that was like around 2000,
2008.
2008. Yes, I think I was working in a very small company that was doing some PHP for um, invoicing system, because we started to introduce in Spain the concept of electronic billing. And I was doing a system for generating the bills, signing with a hardware signing machine, all that stuff, all that things that were necessary for that. And that was my work there. Wasn't super amazing. Was PHP that is was I was doing back then. Um,
But you had been at that company for a long time, right? I mean,
I spent like 2 years in that company, and then I went to one of my most amazing experience. I'm very lucky, to be honest. From there, I went to a small department in a big agency, and the more specifically the open source department. That was what I want to do, open source. And the open source department, like 3 months after I arrived to the company, it decided to just left the company altogether and create a new company. The idea was to create a subsidiary of the agency, but the agency pushed too hard.
when you say agency, is this like a big consulting firm agency?
Yeah, a big consultancy firm. Yeah, exactly, a big consultancy firm, and we were there. And the idea was to create a new small company, a subsidiary of that company, but the big company pushed too hard in things like, I don't want you to give you a percentage or a reasonable percentage of that company, of that subsidiary. So we end up signing our resignation. The whole block of people, the whole department signed a resignation, and we left and we built our own company. So that's what we do.
Okay, time out, time out, time out, time out, dude, time out. You're not even there that long. But so you're working at some consultancy. They have an open source group. What was the business model for that group? How is that group generating revenue?
Okay, that group was building projects for normally for startups, but not necessarily projects from conception to delivery, and using open source tools. That was the idea of open source behind that. So we weren't using anything that was private. We weren't using Oracle or Microsoft, whatever, or everything has to be open source in the technology that we use. For example, Postgres, MySQL, we were using Python and Django.
The only tech that you could use to solve these problems was either you built it yourself or it was open source. With the right licensing, I'm imagining it was either what, like Apache or maybe MIT licensing.
Yeah, well, anything doesn't matter the specific license depending on what you are building. If you are using a tool like Beam, doesn't matter if it's Meet, GPL, or whatever, because you are not delivering that. So we of course we know about the licensing problem, but that wasn't the the idea. The idea is using open source to execute the projects. The project itself were closed source because we're for enterprises. We try to free as much as possible of our work in that project, but wasn't mandatory for the for the company. So it's not necessary.
And then how many of you, 20 of you, decide that you're all going to leave at the same time and start a new consultancy, but you can't take any of the existing clients. So, I mean,
Yeah, we're 15 of us, and one of the the clients that we were working with was was very excited with the team because the team is still there. It's a very talented team, and was super excited. And he said, "You know what? I'm going to put money on that. If you create a new company, I will put money on that company." So he,
so you had your first client.
yeah,
All
actually,
right.
we have our first
But
client. So, yeah,
there's like solicitation agreements. Like if I'm the other company, I'm like, you can't work for these people. They're my client. How do you get around that?
I don't know
I don't know.
exactly
I
how it
just worked and
works,
I got paid.
but yeah, exactly. But the reality is, it went really well. And actually, we left the company. We left the company in 2010, 2011, or something like that. That was the worst time of the crisis. So was like, okay, let's do it in this time, and it went well. It went very well, and yeah, was I was doing Python, a lot of Python back then, and yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah. So you're at that point you're shifting your stack from PHP. You're using Python. You're still building backend services for that kind of stuff. Then integrating to open source projects like you said, Spark or something else.
we were doing projects from scratch and mainly based on Django and Postgres and things like that. And depending on the project, we can require certain things like RabbitMQ for passing messages or things like that. But the reality was there was like complex, big web-based project. That is what I was doing, and based mainly on Django. Um, Sometime after we start including things like Angular or yeah, things like Angular JS and things like that for the front end.
Are you self-hosting these solutions or are you using cloud at that point?
We were using a third-party provider for hosting it, but it wasn't our responsibility to host that. We went from conceptualization to delivery. That's a very interesting idea because for a lot of companies, what is interesting is the maintenance of the projects, and that is exactly what we try to avoid at all cost. So our policy was we build the project, we deliver the project, and we be with you during some month until we transfer the project to your internal team or another team. But we don't want to maintain the project because we want to do the exciting things. We want to work with the new technologies. We want to do cool stuff. And if you have to maintain for 7 years a project, probably you are not using the most shiny things. So uh, that was,
But I'm sure you had to be on call a little bit
oh
to,
yeah,
especially help in the beginning when things are failing. And
yeah, exactly. The idea is well, we were very conscious that we want to transfer the project since the beginning, so we know that we have to pay that price eventually. So we try to keep paying the price over the project to not end up with a project that is not transferable because it's a mess. So we try to make the project easy to understand, easy to maintain, relatively bulletproof, because we are going to pay the price whenever we try to transfer that anyway. So our projects have to be transferable.
if their teams can't maintain it, they're not going to hire you again for the next one.
Oh, no.
I
Not
mean,
only
it's a
that,
balance there.
if they can maintain it, they are going to say, "Hey, I don't want to touch that." So you can't pay me for maintaining that. So that was the idea. Or you
What was the
can
big, I want to talk about that because I think what we've lost today is this idea of wrangling complexity. I focus all of my classes on this. How do we wrangle for the problem you have in front of you and the solution you're going to build? How do you minimize and wrangle the complexity so somebody else can take it over, right? So I'm kind of curious if you can remember some of the strategies that you sort of used to minimize and maybe some of the design philosophies that you use to be able to do that. Because knowing that up front, you could architect and design for it. But I think too many developers don't think about that up front.
yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. I will say mainly is not build cathedrals. Uh, that I know that at certain point on everybody's career, you end up at this point that you are able to build cathedrals. So you build cathedrals because you can. So it's that idea of, hey, I can get this structure and all these patterns and all these things and solve this super generic problem that I don't have. And after you start realizing that, hey, I don't need a cathedral here. I need the simplest possible solution to solve this problem. So aiming for simplicity always pays off. That's my learning from my career. Maybe I'm wrong, but every time I see something that is complicated in the sake of generalization, I try to think about, I need this generalization. If I don't need it now, can I add it later and it's not going to be a huge pain? Can I architect this to make it generalizable later? Because if you start generalizing everything, you can end up with a monster that is not maintainable.
I love that. Dude, I've tried to teach this every single day for the last God knows how many years. It's and it's that experience of saying, you know what, somebody else has to take this over because I don't want to work on this anymore, right? That kind of put that into your that design philosophy, which I try to teach. It's really hard because people, it's so easy to fall into the trap that the software I'm writing is mine, right? And it has to be done a certain way, and nobody else can touch it because they're not going to do it my way. And then you're stuck. You're stuck there forever until you leave. And then the fruits of your labor get thrown away because nobody else can maintain it.
Yeah, isn't well. Some people feel comfortable with that, but I really struggle with the idea of wasting 2 years of my life and ending up going through the toilet. So that's not something that I want to experience. So I think trying to make it maintainable is always great.
It's beautiful. So you're there at this company then for 2 years. They didn't give you out equity or nothing like that since, I mean, it was a big risk.
Yeah. We get some equity there. We get some stocks since the beginning. So yeah,
But you
was
only
was
stay
great.
2 years.
No,
Why?
I stayed there 6 years.
Oh,
I stayed
so six
yeah.
years. So now it's like 2016. right? You started there about 10,
Yeah, I
now
started about
2016.
11 or something like that, and was until um, 17, 18. So something around that date. Um, yeah, I stayed there for 6 years. And yeah, well, also the company was changing also because the foundation of the company was the idea of we want to create our own projects instead of working for third parties, and it ended up being a reality. We start working on a internal project that was called Taiga, that is a project management solution for agile projects, and then we started another project that is called Penpot, that is a alternative to Figma. And actually, the company now it's focused only in internal projects in Penpot and Taiga. So they're no longer working for third parties. So what is amazing was the original intention of the company. But yeah, I left the company before we reached that point that we were only working for themselves.
You saw the writing on the wall, or you just got bored? You were like, time for me to start doing something new.
Well, there's multiple reasons. I left because I was looking for new challenges, a more international environment, and to be fair, some extra money. So that's always great. And I was thinking about the idea of working for a international company. Actually, that was the case, and I told that to my boss and say, hey, I want to do this in around 6 months. I'm going to keep working here for the next 6 months, and then I'm going to start applying for other companies. During that time, I start improving my English and all that stuff. And then 6 months after, I start applying to companies. And actually, there was something that happens that was super cool. I start applying to companies. Some of them reply, some of them don't, and I was getting anxious about that. And some company give me an offer. My boss sent me, "Are you sure that you want to be at that company? If you are sure, it's okay. But if you are not sure, just don't accept it and wait." And I just trust my previous boss, and sometime later I get hired by Mattermost. So I was super excited because we were users of Mattermost, we loved Mattermost, and I start contributing to Mattermost before, and I get hired by an open source international company. um yeah, was like the perfect.
You had a cool boss.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
you
no,
had a
no.
cool company culture to say, "Hey, I'm going to leave in 6 months. This is what I want," and they supported that. I love that. That's the way it should be. The world is too small, and we should all be helping each other.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's completely amazing. So that's no doubt about that. So
So then you start working there in like 2018.
yes.
Yeah, right, because that's why it's 6 years. Okay. Has this company been everything you've wanted it to be? And I'm sure you've changed roles as you've gone through that over the last 6 years.
Yeah, well, yes, okay. It's just different because the company. I come from a very amazing company, as you figure out. So the company culture was different, not necessarily better or worse. Was just different, and that's it's a different sensation, and it depends on your personality. You can end up loving more the one or another. So that's fine. um what I was looking for was challenges and an international environment with high profile engineers. I totally got that. So was Mattermost have a very talented people in it. Mattermost have a very international environment because we have people from all over the world. We have people in Philippines, we have people in South America, North America, Europe, India, uh, Africa. So we have people all over the world. And that is something that I love because you can share culture with other people, talk about food from other countries and things like that. So that was really amazing, and I learned a lot because when I start using Go, when I start contributing to Mattermost, but for sure I ramp up um, drastically when I start working 8 hours a day for Mattermost in Go. So that was great. Over the years, I've been learning and learning and learning and learning, and I keep having challenges inside the company. So that's all I need.
So how do you, when you first get there though, my guess is you're working in Python still, or is a Python job. So talk to me about that transition to Go. Okay.
Oh yeah, what was interesting because I started playing with Go and contributing to Marvel with Go, and I was like, the Go language is something that I love. One of the things that I love from it is kind of the similar sensation when I learned C. When you learn C and you read the C programming language book and all that stuff, you end up saying, okay, that's it, right? There's a lot of complexity, memory management, and all that stuff, but the language itself is tiny, is simple. It's like, okay, that's it. There's nothing else. That's the language, and that sensation was what I had with Go. So I was able to start being productive in less than a month. I
But I'm going to stop you for a second. Why did Go end up on your radar? What was the project or the situation where it was like, okay, here's Go. I don't know this language, but it's now in my life.
Yeah, my in my previous company there was a colleague that was she was trying Go and learning Go, and I found that interesting. So I started trying it, and I start looking for a project to contribute because it's how I try to learn. So if you find a way to contribute to a project, that's a great opportunity for learning. So I saw Mattermost. I started contributing to Mattermost. Was a super welcoming experience that normally is not that common. And when you try to contribute to something, there's no that back and forth is not, that back and forth is not always as fluent as you would like. But with Mattermost at that time was amazing, and I get that point of learning. So it was like I start learning Go, I start contributing to Mattermost, and I want more. So I was a virtual a virtue loop or virtue spiral. So
The Maramos, can you tell me what they do?
Mattermost is a communication platform similar to Slack. So that's the main idea. We have
How do you spell that? Because how do you spell that? I'm trying to look it up.
like what matters the most is matter most.
Oh, Mattermost. Oh, I've heard of Mattermost. I kept hearing. I kept hearing. My hearing's horrible. So,
Oh, and my
oh,
pronunciation is
Mattermost.
not great, anyways.
Mattermost. Yeah, I've heard of Mattermost. Okay, okay. So there's a lot of Go behind
Oh
this
yeah,
platform then.
the whole backend is writing in Go, and
So
the whole cloud is writing in Go also.
and it's all open source too then?
It's an open core model. So we have the open source part that is 98% of the code or something like that, and we have a 2% of the code that is enterprise only. But I'm a very open source person, so I feel comfortable with this model because the philosophy behind is basically if you have a small team, you shouldn't need anything in enterprise. Enterprise is for centralized authentication, for clustering, high availability, all that kind of stuff. It's more in the enterprise side. If you are, for example, a team of 20 people, you don't need enterprise. So that's the idea. You can use it for free. You can use it forever if you want. Um, our idea is the features are in that side because if you have 10,000 employees, you can pay the license. So if you don't pay the license having that, it's because you don't want, but you have the budget. And the idea is the people that have the budget pay for the party. basically, and everybody else.
So were you using Mattermost? Were you using Mattermost instead of Slack at that company that you were at?
Yes.
Okay. And then you saw that there was the opportunity to contribute to some of the code base, but it was in Go. So that's when you started learning Go and started contributing. And then at some point, you're looking for a job. They end up, how come you didn't apply there almost day one? You didn't feel you were good enough to work there?
Not necessarily. Well, for sure, I wasn't good enough in Go back then. Probably they hired me, and I wasn't good enough in Go. But well, I learned fast, so that wasn't a problem. But but I think I started contributing because it was interesting for me, and I want to exercise my Go. And then I realized that they have an offer.
Ah, all right. You didn't, it's funny that it didn't pop into your head earlier, but whatever, you got there, right? You got there.
What was like just perfect for me was like
But
open
what was your
source.
first job there? Was your first job working on some of the back end services in Go?
What I in Mattermost, we back then we were all full stack engineers, so we were doing everything. We were developing features from top to bottom. So that was my work too. So I took some features that were that I don't remember even which feature were, but but I take care of some features that were isolated enough to start with and all that stuff.
Is the UI written in Electron, like on Slack?
Yes, it's an Electron app. It's the UI. It's a web page. Actually, it's a React application that we embed inside an Electron app. So yeah,
Ah, okay. All right. All right. That's
it's
fair.
what it is. It's not
It
it's
works.
not the ideal, but it saves a lot of effort because if you have to build a
No,
desktop application, it's
you need an app for these types of products because I don't like having browser tabs just open, but I don't mind having the app sitting there in the background.
not only that, there's a lot of things that you can do in an app that you can't do in a web. For example, things like do not disturb detection, things like that, that your system gets locked, or things like that, or the daeming, something like the daeming in the operating system. I can, oh, you are using dark theme, so I'm going to apply to the automatically to your application or things like that. There's a lot of things that you can do in an app and not in a web app.
So, how long ago? So, you've been there 6 years. You're a staff engineer, which is not an easy position to get anywhere. It takes a lot of time and effort to become a staff anywhere. I'm curious though, when was it that you decided I want to start looking at the internals of Go? It wasn't day one there, obviously. It wasn't yesterday. It wasn't yesterday. So, kind of talk about that.
To explain that, I think I have to give you some background. Back back in the university, I mentioned the Linux user group. I was there in the Linux user group, and we were is where stored I started uh, talking publicly because we have some courses, some talks every 6 months organized by the Linux user group, and I did a lot of talks there. After that, like in 2011, from 2011 to 2018, I was talking in conferences about Python, Django, all that stuff. And um, and then I switch again, and I have to wait until I know enough to be able to give talks. But I always like to give talks about things that I consider I want to. I want somebody to talk me about. I would love that somebody talk me about the internals of the compiler, and I don't need to do the talk. So, but nobody was doing that, so I had to do it. Um, Also, the first thing that I started investigating was how the internal structures of Go of slices, maps, and channels work, because it was interesting for me. And actually, I did a similar talk in EuroPython in 2018 18 or 16 or something like that, where I explored the internals of the built-in types of Python. And that was interesting. And I thought, okay, something like that will be interesting for Go. What will be the equivalent? And for me, the equivalent was slices, map, and channels and how they work internally. So I prepared that talk and I start doing more things related to that, exploring the compiler, exploring the runtime, exploring how Go routines works internally, all that stuff. But that comes from that background of trying to find in conferences what I would like to find, and if I don't find it, I do it myself. And also, I really like when I see conferences like GopherCon or something like that, and somebody talk about specifically about the language, because there's a lot of things about libraries, products, or stories about success. That is okay. That all that stuff is super valuable, but sometimes I miss people talking about the specifics of the language.
Have you ever seen the Writing a Compiler in Go book by Thorsten?
It's
What is
in
it?
my it's in my
Thorsten Ball. Yeah.
yeah, it's in my shelf. So yeah,
No.
it's a great
Yeah,
book
that
actually.
looks like a cool project. Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's a kind of toy compiler. It's going to teach you a lot about compilers and interpreters, but it's again, it's not a real thing. It's not Go is the real thing, and that's what was attracting for me. But I'm not saying that book is not great, because it's great. Actually, I read that book, so it's amazing. But it's different. It's a completely different target. It's like, okay, but for example, I also read back then in the university the Book of the Dragon, and it's not even related to that. It's like, okay, there's a ton of theory about compilers, but you don't know how a compiler works.
There's somebody, I'm guessing it's Thorsten, but it may not be. Yeah, I'm sure it was him. I think he's taken this compiler to the next level. If you follow his Twitter feed, he's added SSA. He's added the, what is that, static single assignment support to it. He's really, I think he's gone down a rabbit hole at some point with this thing, which is wild. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, that's cool.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I think you should look at his Twitter feed, because I think he took that to the next level, which is wild. But here's a question. So you've learned the internals of the compiler, you've learned the internals of the runtime. Do you have any sort of story where that knowledge, that specific knowledge of the internals, helped you solve a problem that you were having?
I that's a good question. I always say in my talks that I love to give talks that are completely useless. And to be honest, talk about the compiler and the talk about the runtime, it's not especially useful. There's a lot of things that I learned through the process that help me in different things. For example, learning about AST helped me then to build inside Mattermost some linters for certain policies that we want to apply to the code. And for that, we did GoBed, and GoBed is using AST. So it's something, there's things here and there that you can apply. Understanding how the slices works and how the slices grow, it's something that you can apply to have better performance on or avoid some pitfalls that are there. So there's a lot of things that it's like background knowledge. It's something that is there. Sometimes I'm 100% sure I applied some of that knowledge without knowing it, without noticing it. And it's hard to tell if I'm applying what I learned from the compiler, because there's a blurry space there. It's like I learn things from the compiler, maybe specific things sometimes, maybe more general things. And the more general things, I'm applying that because I learned it in the compiler or because the concept itself is useful. It's a blurry line. It's hard to tell.
I built a tool that reads the service project code and generates the documentation for the web API. And I had a horrific time with the AST package API where I need somebody to, I might want to have you look at this because I got it working. This is like draft, this is programming. I don't know how to take this programming I did and engineer it to something that's maintainable. Uh, and every time I look at it, my brain shuts down. So I think at GoFCon EU, I'm going to sit with you because I want to have a better understanding of how to really use the AST package instead of hacking with it, which is what I did, and figure out how to do some engineering around that. I think that would be incredibly useful, at least for me. And then one day I decided I wanted to look at how the escape analysis, no, how inlining was either escape analysis or inlining worked. And bro, I after about 20 minutes, I just gave up. I gave up because I couldn't understand how they were gathering that point system. You know, if you score 80 or less, then we can inline. And I I spent 20 minutes. I said, nope, my brain, I'm done. Some of that code isn't easy to trace through.
Yes, no, the compiler code is not the easiest code in the world. It's Go. That's a huge improvement because Go feels like home almost in every project. It's like, okay, or you feel like home and you're saying, oh, this is Go writing in Java style or in Python style or something like that. That can happen also. But in general, if they are using a good practices in Go, you feel like at home in any Go project. The problem with Go, it's a complex project. It's a really complex project. So yeah, finding out how that counting works, I haven't explored that. I know that there's a punctuation system, and if it's more than, I think it's 80 actually, the number. It's more than 80, it's not going to be in line. If it's less, it's going to be in line. That's how it works.
That's your next project. I think they rewrote a lot of that code anyway since the last time I looked at it, but that's your next talk, okay? Walk me through how the compiler scores a piece of code. Like that to me is interesting. And that can be practical because now when you're writing a function and you see that it's not inlining and you really need to, now you have a practical sort of guidebook on uh, how to get that thing, right? And there's some general things you can do that I talk about in class, but to have a real sort of guidebook would be, see, that to me would be looking at mechanics to provide a practical sort of guidebook around it.
Yeah, well, actually, what I'm preparing is slightly different. What I'm trying to prepare, I haven't done it yet. I want to prepare something around reflection and understanding how reflection works and how where that data comes from. That it actually comes from the binary, and there's a section in the binary that is going to include all that information, and then reflection access to that information at runtime.
Yeah, I need my inlining. I need my inlining first, man. Come on, move my inlining up to the top, and break down the algorithm and break down the point system. Break that down. That's really practical. If you produced a practical guidebook on that, real like rules or something on if you do these things, right? And this is why, because mechanically.
I think something that can be more interesting is to have similar to the allocations where it say you, hey, this line is creating one allocation, this line is creating whatever. Having something annotations aside the code that is saying, hey, this line here is adding X points, this line here is adding Y points. All that stuff will be pretty cool.
Yeah, and they have the somebody already built the sort of escape analysis plugin for VS Code. I turn all that stuff off. I don't look at it. It's too much noise for me. But some people like it, right? So you can see, but that to me would be more interesting and I think more practical when somebody's having a performance issue. And it's like, because we could go after all the memory allocations and you should do that, right? Like that should be your first choice in terms of let's try to improve the performance. But once you've done that, now it's all CPU. And it could very well be a function that's in a tight loop that just isn't being called. It's not being inlined, and that could be that's how you could solve that performance problem. But without a proper guidebook, you're kind of just guessing and running running the analysis to like the dash M switch again and looking and looking and but no one's ever produced this document, by the way. Nobody's ever produced this.
I'll take a look because in fact, it's an interesting topic. So, yeah, and actually, the about performance, the cool thing about inlining and escape analysis is that they work in tandem. So, even if you know better when something is in line, you can save some escape variables there. So,
Sure. Just a function that returns shares a value up the call stack. If that gets inlined, you've gotten rid of both the function call and the allocation.
actually, I learned that from one of your courses, to be honest.
Nice. All right, so you've been at Mattermost for 6 years. That seems to be your limit. So not to get anybody worried at Mattermost, but so are you still like feeling like there's still a lot for you to do there? Like, where does Jesus want to be in the next 5 years?
Okay. Yes, I'm totally happy where where I am now. So I'm not looking for a change because I don't need a change right now. I'm not saying no to anything. If suddenly Rob Pikes comes and say me, hey, come to work with my team, of course I'm going to say yes. But probably as any Go developer in the world. But other than that, I'm super happy where I am. So I'm not going to say if there's a huge offer, super amazing situation, or something super cool. Probably I will say yes. But other than that, and it's not going to happen because I'm not looking for that. So I'm not asking people, hey, offer me money or offer me a good job. I'm not asking, so nobody is going to come to me. Or I don't expect that happening. So.
All right. Well, we're basically out of time. This was amazing to catch up with you. Right? I've seen you giving talks before, and we've never actually talked. So this was great. If anybody wants to reach out to you after listening to this show, what's the best? We'll put it in the show notes too. But what's the best way for people to reach out?
Well, probably the Twitter is a very good approach because I don't receive too many messages through Twitter. So if you send me a message through Twitter, I'm going to answer for sure. Probably my email is easy to find. So yes, email is another option, but it's more possible that I don't even see that because I see the email, I don't recognize it, and I leave it to later, and then is behind a pile of emails, and I don't read that. So probably Twitter is.
So do you run Slack? You run Slack on your computer so you can be part of the Gopher Slack community, or Mattermost? That's just like
Okay. I do both. I'm part of the Gopher Slack community, so through Slack you can contact me too. If you are into Mattermost and you are in the Mattermost community server, you can contact me also through there. But yeah, Slack also works. And we are not anti-Slack in Mattermost. Slack is a great product. So we are not anti-Slack. We provide other values, and we think we do a great job here. But Slack does great also.
And if anybody wants to see you live, I got to get this show out like ASAP so I can say this. If anybody wants to see you live, then you're going to be in Athens for GopherCon EU. What is that? February 6, 7, 8, something like that.
Yes, it's going to be 8. It's going to be the talks day, but it's going to be 6 to 8.
Oh, and 8. Yeah, so he's talking the second day.
Yes.
But we'll get to see each other real soon too. So that's awesome. So this is Jesus and Bill Kennedy signing off to the On Labs podcast, and we hope to see everybody again real soon.